They told you your life was ordinary, predictable, forgettable. They lied. You ever get that feeling? Like you're being watched, not in a paranoid way. No, in a curated way. Like someone's been waiting, studying, calculating, smiling in the dark while you struggle to pay bills, chase dreams, survive another Monday. Funny thing is, you've never heard of them. And yet, they know your name, not the one on your ID. Not the one your friends shout across the street. I'm talking about the name written in ink that never fades, sealed in documents older than the countries you swear allegiance to. A secret society, ancient, silent, powerful, claims you as their lost heir. An empire hidden behind governments. A lie stitched into the fabric of history. Power that decides who rises and who disappears. And a prophecy that ends with you. You've never applied. You've never signed. You've never even believed in this kind of fairy tale. But what if the fairy tale believes in you? What if every setback, every betrayal, every door slammed in your face wasn't rejection, but preparation? They say blood remembers. They say legacy doesn't die. They say destiny doesn't knock, it detonates. So ask yourself, why do you feel different? Why do you feel like you're meant for something bigger? Something dangerous? Why does chaos feel familiar? Maybe you're not lost. Maybe you were hidden. And tonight, we pull back the curtain. Because if a secret society is claiming you as their lost heir, the real question isn't, is it true? The real question is, are you ready to take the throne or burn the kingdom down while you laugh? You wake up every morning thinking this is it. This predictable cycle, alarm, phone messages, responsibilities. You tell yourself this is adulthood, this is reality. This is what everyone does. But what if it isn't? What if the life you've been living isn't your real life at all? Just a carefully constructed disguise. Think about it. How many times have you felt out of place in rooms you technically belong in? How many times have you looked at the people around you and felt like you were playing a character in someone else's script? Smiling when you don't mean it. Nodding when you disagree. Shrinking when something inside you wants to dominate the entire space. That's not confusion. That's friction. Friction between who you were told to be and who you actually are. They handed you a normal identity early, a background, a limitation, a ceiling. They dressed it up as practicality. Be realistic. Be safe. Don't aim too high. Stay in your lane. And you obeyed. Because that's what trained minds do. You built a personality that fit the expectations around you. You learned how to blend in, how to not draw too much attention, how to survive instead of conquer. But here's the joke. Survival was never your design. Somewhere deep inside you, there's a voice that doesn't sound ordinary. It doesn't whisper about comfort. It doesn't beg for approval. It doesn't crave permission. It speaks in ambition, in dominance, in legacy, and every time you silence it, you feel that strange ache. Like you're betraying something ancient within you. Ever notice how chaos doesn't scare you the way it scares others? How pressure sharpens you instead of breaking you? How when everything falls apart, a strange calm takes over? That's not accidental. That's not random personality traits. That's conditioning surfacing. That's a system inside you activating when the mask starts to crack. Because an ordinary life is the perfect hiding place. No one suspects the average. No one monitors the invisible. If you were meant to be protected, hidden, preserved until the right moment, wouldn't the safest strategy be to bury you under normalcy? Give you bills instead of blueprints. Give you routines instead of rituals. Keep you distracted with survival so you never question your inheritance. And yet, you question it. You feel the gap between your current reality and your internal potential. You feel like you're capable of more, not in a vague motivational way, but in a specific, almost dangerous way, like you were built for influence, for impact, for decisions that shift outcomes. That kind of feeling doesn't grow in small soil. What if your struggles weren't signs of weakness, but tests of containment? What if every limitation placed on you was designed to see whether you would accept it, whether you would shrink into the identity handed to you or start clawing at the walls? Because the moment you start asking, "Is this all there is?" the cover begins to tear. You weren't born small. You were introduced to smallness. You weren't created average. You were conditioned into comfort, and the more you reflect on your life, the more the cracks appear. The coincidences, the instincts, the unexplainable pulls toward power, mystery, strategy. An ordinary life isn't proof that you are ordinary. It might be proof that you were hidden in plain sight. You think no one noticed you, that you've been moving through life unseen, just another face in the crowd, another profile in the system, another name in a database. That's comforting, isn't it? The idea that you're insignificant enough to escape attention. But what if that comfort is the illusion? Because attention doesn't always look like spotlights and applause. Sometimes it looks like silence, observation, patience. How many coincidences have shaped your path? The right person appearing at the wrong time. The wrong opportunity closing before it ruined you. Situations that forced you to grow faster than everyone around you. You call it luck, or misfortune, or timing. But what if it was calibration? Watching doesn't mean interfering. Not immediately. Real power studies first. It analyzes patterns, your reactions, your breaking points, your strengths under pressure. It waits to see whether you collapse or evolve. You were taught to believe in luck, in chance, in being at the right place at the right time. They told you success is random, that greatness is a lottery ticket handed out to a chosen few. It keeps people calm, you know. If it's luck, then no one has to question blood. No one has to question lineage. No one has to question why you feel different. But luck is a convenient story for people who don't understand legacy. Because there are traits you carry that weren't taught to you. Instincts you never studied. Reactions that feel older than your own experience. The way you assess a room within seconds. The way you sense intention before words are spoken. The way pressure doesn't paralyze you. It clarifies you. That isn't random development. That's inheritance. Bloodline isn't just about a last name or family wealth. It's about coded memory. Behavioral patterns pass through generations. Strengths embedded so deeply they surface without instruction. You may not know the faces of those who came before you, but parts of them live in your decisions. Ever notice how certain paths feel familiar, even when you've never walked them? How leadership feels natural, even when you try to avoid it? How strategy excites you more than comfort? Those impulses aren't accidents. They're echoes. Luck is chaotic. Bloodline is consistent. Luck gives without warning and takes without explanation. But inheritance builds patterns. It reveals itself in habits, in preferences, in the way you handle conflict. You don't crumble easily. You analyze, you adapt, you strike when necessary. Those aren't traits you casually stumbled upon. Some people chase power for ego, for validation, for attention. But when you think about influence, it doesn't feel foreign. It feels like something you're supposed to step into, something waiting rather than something you're stealing. That sensation doesn't come from wishful thinking. It comes from recognition of something embedded. Maybe that's why mediocrity feels suffocating to you. Why settling feels like betrayal. Why playing small feels physically uncomfortable. Because deep down, you sense that shrinking isn't humility, it's denial. Denial of capability that didn't start with you. Bloodline isn't always visible. Sometimes it's hidden, scattered, buried under ordinary circumstances. But it resurfaces in behavior, in hunger, in resilience that seems disproportionate to your upbringing. In ambition that feels inherited rather than learned. You faced moments where you surprised even yourself, where you handled chaos with unnatural calm, where you made decisions that required courage you didn't know you possessed. That wasn't luck visiting you for a day. That was legacy activating. And here's the uncomfortable part. If your strengths are inherited, so is your responsibility. Because bloodline doesn't just pass down ability, it passes down expectation. It carries unfinished stories, unclaimed power, interrupted influence waiting for continuation. You may not know the origin. You may not have the full history. But you feel the weight of something larger than your individual life. A sense that your actions ripple further than they logically should. Luck fades. Inheritance persists. And whether you acknowledge it or not, something in you doesn't feel accidental. Think about your hardest moments. The times you felt isolated, tested, pushed beyond your comfort. Didn't it feel almost intentional? Like the difficulty was tailored specifically to you. As if someone knew exactly how much weight to add to the bar before it would either crush you or make you stronger. Observation is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. Maybe that's why you feel it sometimes. That subtle awareness. That sense that your actions matter more than they logically should. That certain decisions carry a strange gravity. That your mistakes feel monitored. That your victories feel recorded somewhere invisible. You brush it off as imagination. Paranoia, ego. But deep down, you don't fully believe that. Because there have been moments, rare, sharp moments, when you felt evaluated. When someone looked at you and held their gaze just a second too long. When opportunities appeared only after you proved something to yourself. When doors opened not because you begged, but because you endured. Watching isn't about controlling every move you make. It's about measuring who you become when no one is guiding you. Your anger, your ambition, your resilience, your loyalty, your hunger. These aren't random personality traits. They're indicators, signals, data points in a long assessment you didn't know you were part of. And here's the unsettling part. The watching may have started long before you were aware enough to notice. From childhood, you were placed in specific environments, exposed to certain challenges, surrounded by particular influences. You thought it was coincidence, circumstance, fate. But what if it was positioning? Not to protect you from struggle, but to see how you handle it. Because anyone can perform when they know they're being judged. The real evaluation happens when you believe you're alone. Every choice you made when no one clapped. Every time you chose growth over comfort. Every time you refused to break completely. Those moments weren't wasted. They were observed, logged, weighed. The feeling of being watched isn't about fear. It's about significance. You don't monitor something meaningless. You don't invest time studying someone average. You observe potential. You watch inheritance. You track legacy before it awakens. And maybe that's why, even in your lowest moments, you've never felt entirely abandoned. Because unseen doesn't mean unobserved. Silence doesn't mean absence. And invisibility doesn't mean you were ignored. There's a moment before awakening that feels like restlessness. Not dissatisfaction exactly, more like static under the skin. You function. You work. You socialize. You smile at the right times. But underneath it all, there's a quiet hum, like something inside you is pacing in a locked room. You try to ignore it. You tell yourself it's ambition, or boredom, or ego. But it doesn't go away. It gets louder when you're alone. Louder when you accomplish something that should have satisfied you but doesn't. Louder when you watch others settle into lives that would suffocate you. That hum isn't hunger for attention. It's power waking up. Hidden power doesn't arrive like lightning. It unfolds slowly, almost reluctantly. First, it shows up as awareness. You start noticing patterns other people miss. Power dynamics in conversations. Motivations behind smiles. Weaknesses hidden in confidence. You don't just hear words anymore. You read intention. Then comes detachment. Things that once triggered you emotionally begin to lose their grip. Drama feels predictable. Manipulation feels transparent. You stop reacting impulsively and start observing strategically. That shift isn't coldness. It's control. Control is power's first language. You begin questioning limitations you once accepted. Rules, expectations, invisible ceilings. You start seeing how many boundaries are social constructs maintained by fear. And instead of automatically respecting them, you analyze them. Can this be moved? Can this be broken? Should this even exist? That curiosity isn't rebellion for chaos' sake. It's awakening authority. Hidden power also changes your tolerance. You become less patient with mediocrity, less impressed by loud confidence, less willing to shrink to make others comfortable. Not because you crave dominance, but because pretending small feels dishonest. You start feeling responsible for your potential. That's when it gets uncomfortable. Because awakening means you can't go back to ignorance. Once you recognize your capacity, every excuse feels heavier. Every wasted opportunity feels sharper. You can no longer convincingly tell yourself, this is enough, when you know it isn't. And with that realization comes fear. Not fear of others, fear of yourself. What happens if you fully step into your capability? What changes? Who feels threatened? What parts of your current identity dissolve? Power doesn't just elevate, it disrupts. It rearranges relationships. It exposes insecurity in others. It demands decisions you can't undo. So part of you hesitates. But the other part, the deeper part, feels relief. Relief that the restlessness had a reason. Relief that the discomfort wasn't madness. Relief that the sense of being meant for more wasn't arrogance. It was intuition. Hidden power doesn't shout at first. It tests your readiness. It increases your awareness, strengthens your discipline, expands your vision. It watches how you handle small influence before offering larger responsibility. And you've noticed it, haven't you? Moments where you command a room without raising your voice. Situations where others look to you for direction naturally. Decisions you make that shift outcomes more than expected. That's not coincidence stacking up. That's alignment. Something within you is stretching beyond the identity you were given. The mask feels tighter. The role feels outdated. The ordinary narrative no longer fits the internal expansion happening beneath it. Awakening isn't loud. It's inevitable. There comes a point where neutrality is no longer an option. Where standing in the middle feels more dangerous than choosing a side. You can sense it building. That pressure in your chest, that tightening in your thoughts. Because once you recognize your position, once you understand the weight of what you carry, you don't get to pretend you're just another bystander. You either claim what's yours, or you reject it so violently that everything burns. Taking the throne isn't about arrogance. It's about acceptance. Acceptance that you were never designed to live quietly under someone else's rule. That your instincts weren't given to you to be muted. That your strategic mind wasn't meant for small decisions that change nothing. But claiming power requires transformation. It demands that you shed the comfortable identity you've been hiding behind. The humble disguise. The self-doubt that kept you safe. The excuses that made your inaction seem reasonable. You can't step into authority while apologizing for existing. And that's terrifying. Because the moment you rise, you become visible, judged, challenged, tested openly instead of silently. People who were comfortable with your potential will grow uncomfortable with your presence. Allies will reveal themselves. So will enemies. The throne isolates before it empowers. But the alternative is destruction. Not chaos for entertainment. Not rebellion without direction. Real destruction. The dismantling of systems that tried to confine you. The tearing down of false narratives about who you are. The breaking of structures that limited your reach. If you refuse to claim leadership, that energy doesn't disappear. It turns explosive. Suppressed power doesn't fade. It corrodes. It shows up as anger, as sabotage, as self-destruction, as burning bridges you could have ruled from. If you deny your inheritance long enough, you don't become harmless. You become unpredictable. That's the duality inside you. You have the capacity to build empires, or to dismantle them, to bring order, or to expose weakness so brutally that collapse becomes inevitable. The difference isn't ability, it's choice, and choice is responsibility. If you claim the throne, you accept discipline, strategy, patience. You understand that influence isn't about ego, it's about stewardship. You learn when to speak, and when silence carries more authority. You control your impulses instead of being controlled by them. But if you reject it, you stop playing by the invisible rules. You question everything. You challenge every structure that feels artificial. You stop protecting systems that never protected you. And your laughter, that sharp, knowing laughter, becomes a signal that you're no longer afraid of consequences. Because what can they threaten you with? Mediocrity. You've outgrown it. Rejection. You've survived it. Isolation. You were forged in it. The throne represents responsibility embraced. Burning the kingdom represents responsibility denied. Either way, you don't remain ordinary. You feel it already, that crossroads forming. That sense that your next decisions carry more weight than usual. That your tolerance for small living is evaporating. That your patience with limitation is thinning. Power doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It waits. And eventually, it demands an answer.